The celestial crown drifted silently in orbit around the twin suns of Eridan. It was a vessel built not for war or exploration, but for comfort. Every surface gleamed with polished alloys. Every room smelled faintly of rare flowers imported from distant moons, and every corridor was lit with a soft golden glow that felt like walking through a dream. The ship belonged to Orion Vale, a man known throughout the star systems for his wealth and his empire of resource colonies. Orion Vale had built cities on frozen asteroids. He had negotiated trade deals with worlds so far from Earth that their skies glowed a different color. He had stood in command centers that controlled fleets of ships capable of crossing half the galaxy without stopping. He had done all this and more. But now, standing inside the nursery of his own ship, he faced a problem that all his money and power could not solve. In the center of the nursery floated two infants. They were his children, a boy and a girl, born only months ago in the ship's medical wing. They had inherited their father's deep eyes and the faint golden tone of their skin from their mother, who had been an artist from the Virel colonies. Orion loved them in a way that surprised him, but there was a problem. They would not eat. It had begun with the usual feeding cycles: nutrient paste, formula blends, even carefully programmed food replicator outputs. The ship's medical team had calculated every vitamin, every protein, every mineral. Yet the twins would turn away, their tiny hands pushing the bottles aside, their faces crinkling in rejection. It was not anger. It was not illness. It was as if they simply refused. Orion had immediately called for help. The best specialists in the Orion Spur answered. The first was a nanny from the core worlds, trained in child development under artificial gravity. She used soft voices, soothing tones, and the most advanced feeding devices available. After 3 days, she admitted defeat. The second nanny arrived from the Kalara Belt, a woman with years of experience caring for children born in deep space mining stations. She used rhythmic sounds, holographic distractions, and altered gravity, patterns in the room to relax the infants. It failed. The third nanny was from a colony on the far edges of human settlement. She brought with her old-world tricks, games, and songs taught to her by her grandmother. For a brief moment, Orion thought it might work. The twins seemed curious, almost interested. But by the end of her first week, she too was forced to confess she could not feed them. Now Orion stood alone in the nursery, except for the gentle hum of the environmental systems and the slow spin of the stars outside the wide observation windows. He was a man who made decisions quickly, yet here he hesitated. He could not understand what the children needed, and without understanding, he could not fix the problem. He tried to distract himself with work. The celestial crown had been scheduled to travel to the mining colonies of the Tanis Rift. There were contracts to review and shipments to approve. But every time he left the nursery, he found himself drawn back. It was not just hunger that worried him. It was the way the twins seemed distant, as if some invisible barrier existed between them and the rest of the ship. That evening, as the twin suns dipped lower beyond the horizon of the nearby planet, the ship's AI reported something unusual. A young applicant had requested to board the Celestial Crown in response to Orion's open call for assistance. Her name was Maris Kellen. She was not a trained nanny. She was not a medical expert. Her file described her simply as a culinary engineer from Earth, recently working in orbital farming stations. At first, Orion ignored the application. What could a cook offer in this situation that the best childcare experts in the galaxy could not? Yet the AI noted that she had traveled with cargo haulers for years and had a record of improvising solutions under unusual conditions. The AI, which rarely gave personal suggestions, recommended at least meeting her. Orion sighed and approved her boarding. It would take her only a few hours to arrive by shuttle from the nearby station. In that time, he sat by the nursery window and watched the faint glow of the suns on the planet below. The children floated in their rest cradles, quiet, their eyes tracking the movement of light across the glass. When the shuttle finally docked, Orion went to greet her. Maris Kellen stepped onto the ship wearing a simple gray jacket, boots scuffed, from station work, and a small case slung over her shoulder. She was younger than he expected, with calm eyes that seemed to notice every detail without rushing to speak. She looked around the polished reception hall of the Celestial Crown without awe, as if she were simply here to do a job. "You are here to feed my children?" Orion said, not as a question but as a statement. "I am here to try," Maris replied. Her voice was steady. He led her to the nursery. She took in the sight of the twins, the advanced feeding equipment, the nutrient packs, and the hovering medical drones. She asked no questions at first. She simply watched the children for a few minutes. Orion waited for her to begin using one of the devices, but she did not. Instead, she opened her small case. Inside were no medical tools, no holographic distractors, only a thin book bound in faded brown material. Orion realized with some surprise that it was made of paper. She flipped through the pages slowly. They were filled with handwritten notes and sketches of food. He recognized none of it. "What is that?" he asked. "My family recipes," she answered. "From Earth." Orion raised an eyebrow. "The children do not need cake or bread. They need nutrients." Maris closed the book gently. "Sometimes the form matters as much as the content. If they will not eat what you give them, perhaps you must give them something they want, even if it contains the same nutrition inside." "I would like to use your galley." Orion considered refusing, but something in her tone stopped him. There was no arrogance in her voice, only certainty. He gave her permission, though he could not imagine how cooking would succeed where the galaxy's most advanced methods had failed. As she left for the galley, Orion glanced back at the twins. For the first time in days, they were watching someone, with interest. Their eyes followed Maris until the door closed. Orion did not know it yet, but this was the moment everything began to change. The Celestial Crown had one of the finest galleys in known space. It was more than a kitchen. It was a compact laboratory of taste, built from polished steel and lined with precision instruments. Most ships no longer needed a galley at all. Nutrient. Synthesizers could create any flavor or texture a person wanted. Yet Orion Vale had insisted on keeping a galley aboard his flagship. Not because he used it, but because he believed a ship should have the option for real cooking, even if that option gathered dust. Maris Kellen stepped inside the galley and looked around with calm interest. She ran her fingers along the cool counter surface, paused at the storage units, and opened a few to inspect what was inside. Orion stood near the doorway, watching. He expected her to be impressed by the sleek equipment, but she was not. She treated it as a workspace, not as a display of wealth. "Do you need a nutrient synthesizer?" Orion asked, gesturing toward the tall silver unit against the wall. Maris shook her head. "No. If I use it, the food will have the same problem. I need real ingredients. Where do you store them?" Orion frowned. "I doubt we have much in the way of raw food. This is not a farming ship." The ship's AI voice spoke from a small panel near the ceiling. "Fresh storage contains a limited supply of fruit, grain, and dairy products from the last port. Expiration estimates are within safety range." Maris nodded to the AI's voice. "That will do." She began gathering items. A container of flour, a small tin of natural sugar, a cluster of pale yellow fruit with a scent like warm sunlight. She moved with a quiet certainty, placing each item on the counter as if arranging pieces of a puzzle. Orion stepped closer. "You believe the children will eat this?" "I believe they will recognize it," Maris said. "Not with their memory, because they are too young, but with something older. A part of being human is knowing the smell of food that was grown and made, not assembled from molecules." She began to work. The galley was silent, except for the soft sound of her mixing ingredients. She did not rush. Orion noticed her hands were steady, her movements precise, but not mechanical. Every step seemed to have purpose. While she worked, Orion found his mind drifting. He thought of his own childhood on Earth, before he left to chase the stars. He had grown up in a city filled with towers of glass and steel. Yet even there he remembered the smell of bread from a small shop near his home. He had not thought of that in years. The scent in the galley began to change. At first it was only a faint warmth, then it deepened into something rich and inviting. The air seemed to soften around them. Orion realized he was breathing more slowly, as if his body had decided to match the rhythm of the work. Maris glanced at him. The human sense of smell is connected strongly to memory. Even a newborn can respond to certain scents if those scents have meaning in their heritage. The twins may not know what cake is, but they will understand that it is real. Heritage, Orion repeated. You think food can carry that? I know it can, she said simply. The AI spoke again from the ceiling. Observation. Heart rate patterns aboard the ship show minor changes in nearby crew. Increased calm and focus detected. Possible cause is the aroma spreading from the galley. Orion raised an eyebrow. You are affecting my crew with cake. Maris allowed herself a faint smile. Good food does that. He could not deny it. Already he felt the air in the galley was different, less like a sterile machine space and more like home. After a while, she placed the prepared mixture into a heating unit. Unlike the nutrient synthesizers, this unit did not operate silently. It hummed softly, radiating a gentle heat into the room. Orion found himself standing closer to it without realizing why. Maris took the waiting time to clean the counter. She moved without wasted motion, every gesture deliberate. Orion noted she did not seem nervous in his presence, even though most people were. She carried herself as if the work was the important thing, not the person watching her. When the heating unit signaled completion, she opened it. A wave of scent rolled into the room, stronger than before. It was warm, sweet, and somehow alive. Orion felt it stir something deep inside him, a memory without clear shape, only the sense of safety and belonging. Maris placed the golden-brown cake onto the counter. Steam rose gently from its surface. She did not rush to cut it. Instead, she let it rest, her eyes focused as if the moment was part of the process. You are going to feed this to my children, Orion said. Yes, she replied. Not yet. It must cool first, and when I bring it to them, I will not force it. They must choose to reach for it. Orion was not used to patience, yet he waited. In the quiet, the sound of the ship's systems faded into the background, replaced by the simple presence of the cake between them. At last, Maris cut a small piece and placed it on a shallow dish. She looked up at Orion. Shall we go to the nursery? They walked through the ship's polished halls, the dish carefully held in her hands. Crew members they passed turned their heads, following the scent with curious eyes. Some smiled without knowing why. The AI noted each reaction, but did not comment. When they entered the nursery, the twins were floating in their rest cradles as before. Their eyes turned immediately toward the new arrival. Orion watched closely. Usually they showed little interest in visitors, but now both children were focused on Maris. She knelt by the nearest cradle and set the dish where they could see it. The scent filled the small space. The twins shifted, small hands reaching out toward the air. Maris did not move closer yet. She let them take in the smell. Orion leaned forward. For the first time in days, he saw a spark of energy in their movements. Their eyes were wide, their hands grasping at the space between them and the dish. They know it, Maris said softly. Not in their minds, but in their senses. This is something human to them, even here in space. Orion felt something shift inside him as he watched. The idea that a simple piece of cake could reach his children where technology had failed seemed impossible. Yet here it was, unfolding in front of him, and though the twins had not yet taken a bite, Orion knew in that moment that Maris Kellen had brought something onto the celestial crown that none of his wealth had ever been able to buy. The nursery on the celestial crown was quiet except for the soft hum of the environmental systems. The walls were a gentle shade of cream, designed to keep the atmosphere calm. A large observation window showed the endless black of space, sprinkled with distant stars. In the middle of the room, the twins floated in their cushioned rest cradles, supported by a faint artificial gravity field. Orion Vale stood near the doorway, watching carefully. He was not a man who usually hovered over anyone's work. In business, he hired the best and trusted them to do their jobs. But this was different. These were his children. He could not step back and simply wait. Maris Kellen walked in carrying the small dish with the slice of cake. She moved slowly, not because she was afraid, but because she understood that the first moment mattered. The twins were watching her, with wide, curious eyes. Their little hands moved in the air as if reaching for something they could not quite see. She placed the dish on a low surface between the two cradles. The faint warmth of the cake carried its scent into the air. The change in the twins was immediate. They leaned slightly forward in their cradles, eyes locked on the dish. Orion felt a rush of hope, though he forced himself not to show it. Maris spoke softly, her voice low and even. "Do you smell that? This is for you." The twins seemed to react to her tone as much as the scent. They turned their heads toward her, then back to the dish. One of them reached out a small hand toward the cake. The other made a soft sound, almost like a question. Maris stayed still, letting them lead the moment. She did not try to take a piece and feed it to them directly. Instead, she broke off a tiny crumb and placed it within easy reach of the nearest hand. The boy twin was the first to touch it. His fingers curled around the crumb and he brought it to his mouth with an awkward but determined motion. He tasted it, paused, and then his expression changed. His brow relaxed, and his eyes widened. He made a soft sound, this time more like delight than confusion. The girl twin leaned forward, reaching toward the dish. Maris gave her a small piece as well. She took it with surprising speed for a child her age, tasted it, and then gave a small, contented hum. Orion exhaled slowly. He had not realized he was holding his breath. The medical drones hovering in the corners immediately began recording data. The AI's voice came through the hidden speakers. Observation. Elevated positive emotional markers detected in both subjects. Stress indicators reduced by 15% in the last 30 seconds. Maris glanced up toward the nearest sensor, as if she could see the AI's presence. "You cannot measure all that matters," she said quietly. Orion heard her, but kept his focus on the twins. They were taking more crumbs now, each one followed by a small look of satisfaction. It was not much, but it was the first real progress since their birth. When they had eaten enough for the moment, Maris gently moved the dish away. She did not want to overwhelm them. She then picked up a small cloth and carefully wiped their hands. They allowed her to do this without pulling away. That alone was unusual. "You did more in 5 minutes than 3 trained nannies could do in weeks," Orion said finally. Maris shook her head. "It is not about skill. It is about connection. They need to feel the world through something real. Machines can create the taste, but not the meaning." Orion considered her words. In his world, meaning came from results, from numbers, from contracts signed and deals closed. But as he looked at his children, he wondered if perhaps he had been missing something. Maris placed the dish on a nearby table and sat cross-legged on the floor between the cradles. The twins watched her closely. She began to speak to them, telling a simple story about a small farm on Earth. She described the sound of rain on the roof, the smell of bread baking in the kitchen, and the feel of warm sunlight through a window. Her voice was calm and steady, each word chosen with care. The twins listened. They did not understand the words, but they followed the rhythm and tone. Orion watched their eyes, noticing how they focused on her face as she spoke. The AI, always. Collecting data, made another observation. Notable decrease in restlessness. Heart rate and breathing patterns indicate a state of calm attention. Orion could not help but smile faintly. It seems you are impressing more than just me. Maris kept her gaze on the twins. I am not here to impress. I am here to help them feel safe. For a few more minutes, the nursery remained peaceful. The twins drifted toward sleep, their small hands relaxing against the soft fabric of their cradles. Maris stood quietly, placing the empty dish back into her case. She did not leave any mess behind. As she moved toward the door, Orion stopped her. You will stay on this ship. I will see to it personally. She looked at him evenly. I will stay as long as the children need me, not a day less, not a day more. It was not the answer Orion was used to hearing. Most people would have jumped at the chance to remain aboard the Celestial Crown for the sake of prestige or comfort. But Maris spoke as if her only concern was the well-being of the twins. After she left the nursery, Orion stood alone for a moment. He looked at the cradles, at the small, peaceful faces of his children. For the first time since their birth, he felt a measure of hope that this strange problem could be solved. The AI broke the silence. Recommendation: continue exposure to sensory-rich, naturally prepared foods. Early data suggests high probability of long-term benefit. Orion nodded slowly. Yes, we will do that. In the galley, Maris cleaned her tools and stored the remaining cake in a sealed container. She worked in the same quiet, methodical way she had prepared it. There was no rush, no wasted movement. Her mind was already thinking ahead. She knew the twins had taken the first step, but this was only the beginning. She considered what she had seen in their reactions, the way their hands had reached, the way their eyes had followed her. It was not just hunger, it was curiosity. Something inside them had recognized the food not as a necessity, but as a connection. And in that moment, Maris decided that her work here would not only be to feed them. It would be to teach them, in whatever way was possible at their age, that even in the middle of cold space, there were things worth holding on to, things that came from the heart of humanity itself. Far above the planet, the celestial crown continued, its silent orbit. Inside, two small lives had taken their first steps toward a different future, and neither Orion Vale nor Maris Kellen could yet see just how far those steps would reach. The next morning, the celestial crown was already awake, long before the first light from the twin suns reached the nursery windows. Orion Vale sat in his private office, reviewing reports from the mining colonies in the Tanis Rift, but his mind kept drifting back to the scene from the night before. The image of his children taking food from Maris Kellen's hand was still sharp in his memory. He had seen many victories in his life, but this one felt different. It was small, quiet, and deeply personal. For the first time in months, the sense of helplessness that had been sitting like a weight on his chest was lifting. The ship's AI interrupted his thoughts with a calm voice. Notification: Maris Kellen is currently in the galley. She has requested access to all remaining natural ingredients in storage. Approve it, Orion said immediately. He left his office and made his way to the galley. When he arrived, Maris was already at work. On the counter sat several small containers: flour, fruit, spices, and a few items Orion did not recognize. She was peeling something that looked like a deep red root, her hands moving with quiet precision. Are you baking again? Orion asked. Maris shook her head. Not today. I want to try something different. The cake worked because it touched their senses. But it is not only sweetness that carries memory. Smell, texture, sound, all of these can connect to something deep inside. Sound? Orion repeated. Yes, Maris replied. When I was young, my grandmother cooked in a small kitchen on Earth. The sound of chopping vegetables, the bubbling of a pot, even the hiss of steam, those sounds were part of the memory. I want to give the twins that same kind of experience, even if they have never heard it before. Orion watched her slice the red root into thin pieces. The knife made a crisp, rhythmic sound on the cutting board. She set the slices into a small pan and began to warm them over a low flame. A soft sizzling filled the galley. Within minutes, a rich, earthy aroma spread into the air. Orion noticed it was less sweet than the cake, yet equally inviting. It was the kind of smell that made a person think of warmth and comfort. Maris glanced toward the ceiling, speaking to the AI. Lower galley ventilation by 30%. I want the scent to linger. Confirmed, the AI replied. She then took out a small cloth bag and removed several dried leaves. She crumbled them between, her fingers letting their sharp, fresh scent mix with the warm aroma from the pan. Orion felt the combination stir something in him, an unexpected memory of walking through a greenhouse on his first off-world visit. When the preparation was ready, Maris placed it into a simple ceramic bowl. She covered it with a thin lid to keep the scent strong and carried it toward the nursery. Orion followed, curious about what she would do next. Inside the nursery, the twins were already awake. They floated in their cradles, moving their small hands in the air, as if trying to catch something invisible. When Maris entered, their attention shifted instantly to her. She set the covered bowl on a low table between them and slowly lifted the lid. The warm, earthy scent spread through the room. The twins turned their heads toward it, their eyes wide. Maris knelt between them. "This is for you," she said softly. "Not to eat yet, just to smell. This is part of your world now." She leaned the bowl slightly toward the boy twin. He leaned forward, breathing in. His eyes blinked slowly, and he made a small, satisfied sound. The girl twin followed, reaching out her hands toward the bowl as if she wanted to hold it. Orion stood silently behind Maris, watching. He had seen them restless and uninterested so many times before. Now their focus was sharp. They were engaged, curious, and calm. Maris then began to speak in a slow, steady rhythm. She described the color of the root, the way it felt in her hands, and the sound it made when sliced. She told them how the leaves had been dried in the sun and how they released their scent when crushed. Her words painted a picture, even though the twins could not yet understand the language. The AI spoke quietly from the corner of the room. Observation: both subjects displaying signs of positive sensory engagement, emotional stability holding steady. Maris looked toward the AI's camera lens. Engagement is good, but what matters most is trust. They must connect this experience with safety. For several minutes, she let the twins explore the scent. Then she placed the bowl aside and took out 2 small spoons. She dipped each into a tiny portion of the cooked root and brought it close to the children. The boy twin hesitated for only a moment before taking a small taste. The girl twin followed, tilting her head slightly as she experienced the texture and flavor. Their faces showed no rejection, only quiet curiosity. Maris gave them only a little before stopping. "Too much too soon can turn a new experience into something overwhelming," she explained to Orion. He nodded, though he was still processing what he was seeing. The cake had been impressive, but this was something else entirely. The children were not just accepting the food. They were engaging with the process, responding to the smells and sounds before tasting it. After the short feeding, Maris returned the bowl to the galley. Orion walked with her. "You called this an experiment," he said. "What are you trying to prove?" Maris kept her eyes on the bowl as she carried it. "That the human body and mind are not separate when it comes to food. You can give them the perfect formula, but if it is sterile and without connection, it will never satisfy them completely. We are more than numbers on a nutrient chart. Even here, far from Earth, our senses remember the world we came from." In the galley, she began cleaning the tools she had used. Orion stayed for a moment longer, then finally spoke. "If what you are saying is true, then what you are doing here could be important to more than just my children?" Maris looked up at him. "It could, but for now I am focused on them. They are my world, until they no longer need me." That night, the twins slept more soundly than they had in weeks. The medical drones recorded steady heart rates and calm breathing. Orion stood by the nursery window, watching the stars drift past. He found himself thinking about Earth, not the towering cities or the crowded markets, but the simple things he had almost forgotten. The smell of real rain, the taste of fruit picked from a tree, the sound of a pan sizzling in a quiet kitchen. And for the first time, he wondered what else his children might be missing in the silent, perfect world of the celestial crown. 2 days had passed since Maris began her unusual approach with the twins. Each day brought a new scent, a new sound, or a new texture for them to explore. Orion Vale could see the difference already. The children were calmer, more focused, and more willing to try small tastes of food. Still, they had not yet eaten a full portion of anything. It was progress, but the problem remained. On the morning of the 3rd day, Maris entered the galley earlier than usual. She moved with quiet purpose, placing her small paper recipe book on the counter and opening it to a page that looked well-worn. Orion arrived shortly after, curious to see what she was planning. "You are up early," he remarked. "I have been thinking," Maris replied. "The twins respond strongly to scent and texture, but they need something more, something that draws them in completely. I think it is time for the cake again, but not the same one as before. This one will be richer, softer, and more colorful. It will speak to them in every sense." She began to gather her ingredients: fresh fruit, flour, eggs, sugar, and a small jar of spice that gave off a warm, comforting smell. Orion noticed how carefully she measured each portion. There was no hurry in her movements, yet she wasted no time. As she mixed the batter, she spoke softly, almost as if telling a story. "This cake comes from a recipe that has been in my family for 4 generations. It was made to celebrate the first harvest each year. My grandmother used to say it tasted like the sun after a long winter." Orion leaned against the counter, watching her work. The sound of the spoon scraping the bowl was steady and rhythmic, almost like a quiet drum beat. The scent of the fruit began to rise as she blended it into the mixture. When the batter was ready, she poured it into a round baking pan and slid it into the heating unit. The faint hum of the machine joined the soft sounds of the galley. Slowly, the aroma began to fill the room, sweet, warm, and layered with the spice's gentle heat. The AI's voice broke the silence. Environmental note: scent concentration rising in multiple corridors, several crew members showing signs of positive emotional response. Orion gave a small smile. "It seems you are lifting the mood of my entire ship." Maris glanced at him. "A good meal can do that. Even the smell of it can change the way a person feels." When the cake was ready, Maris removed it from the heating unit. The golden surface glistened faintly in the light. She let it rest for a few minutes, then sliced a small portion and placed it on a dish. Steam curled upward from the warm slice, carrying the scent with it. She looked at Orion. "It is time." They walked together to the nursery. The moment they entered, the twins turned toward the door. Orion could see the change in their expressions the instant they caught the scent. Their eyes lit up, and their small hands reached forward before. They could even see what Maris carried. Maris knelt between the cradles, holding the dish at their level. "This is for you," she said in a gentle voice. The boy twin leaned forward eagerly, his hands opening and closing in a small gesture of excitement. The girl twin made a soft sound, almost like laughter. Maris broke off a tiny piece of the cake and offered it to the boy. He took it without hesitation and brought it to his mouth. His eyes widened as he chewed, and then he made a small, delighted noise. The girl twin was next. She accepted her piece and, after tasting it, reached immediately for more. Maris gave them each another small portion, watching closely to see their reactions. Orion felt something shift in the air. The twins were not just tasting, they were eating. For the first time since their birth, they were taking in food willingly and with visible enjoyment. Their small hands reached for each new piece, and their eyes followed Maris with complete focus. The AI's voice came softly from the wall. Significant increase in positive emotional markers. Nutrient intake at optimal starting levels. Stress indicators have dropped to the lowest recorded since birth. Orion stepped closer, watching, his children with a mixture of wonder and relief. "You have done it," he said quietly. Maris did not look up. She kept her attention on the twins, making sure they did not eat too quickly. "They have done it. I only showed them the way." The twins finished their small portions, and Maris gently took the dish away. She wiped their hands with a soft cloth, speaking to them in a calm, steady tone. The children stayed relaxed, their eyes still following her movements. Orion felt a wave of gratitude, though the words seemed too small for what he was feeling. "You have given them more than food," he said. "You have given them something I could not." Maris finally looked at him. "I gave them something familiar. Even though they have never had it before, something in them knew it was real. That is the power of food made with care." For the next hour, the nursery was filled with a peaceful quiet. The twins drifted toward sleep, their small faces calm. Orion stayed with them, not wanting to leave. He had faced countless challenges in his life, but none had felt as important as this moment. When Maris left the nursery, she returned to the galley to store the rest of the cake. The AI spoke to her on the way. "Observation. Your methods have produced consistent improvements in the subjects. Probability of continued success is high. Would you like me to log this as a formal protocol for child development in space environments?" Maris paused. "Not yet. This is about more than numbers and procedures. It is about understanding that humans are more than the sum of their nutrients." The AI did not respond, but Orion, standing nearby, heard her words. He realized that she was right. The galaxy had advanced so far in technology and efficiency that perhaps they had forgotten the simplest truths. That night, as the celestial crown sailed through the quiet void between stars, Orion stood at the observation window with his children, sleeping nearby. For the first time, he believed they would grow strong, and he knew the reason was not just the food, but the connection that came with it. Somewhere deep in the ship, the scent of Maris's cake still lingered in the air, a quiet reminder that even in the cold emptiness of space, the warmth of humanity could still be found. The morning after the twins had eaten the cake, the celestial crown felt different. It was not something that could be measured on the ship's instruments, yet Orion Vale sensed it the moment he woke. There was a calmness in the air, as if the ship itself had taken a deep breath and released a long-held tension. He walked to the nursery first. The twins were awake and alert, making soft sounds to each other. When they saw him, their eyes lit up in a way he had never seen before. They reached for him with small hands, not in distress, but in welcome. Maris Kellen was already there, sitting cross-legged on the floor between the cradles. She was speaking to the children in a gentle voice. describing the view outside the observation window. A soft golden light from the twin suns spilled into the room, painting everything with warmth. "They slept through the night," Maris said without looking away from the twins. "No interruptions, no restless movement. Their bodies are adjusting." Orion nodded. "It is because of the cake." Maris glanced at him now. "It is not only the cake. The food was part of it, yes. But the real change comes from what it represented to them." He stepped closer. "Explain it to me." She smiled faintly. "Humans have carried their senses through millions of years of change. Long before we built ships and left Earth, our ancestors learned to trust certain signals. The smell of food cooked over heat, the taste of natural sweetness, the sound of soft preparation. These things meant safety. They meant community. You can feed a person all the nutrients they need, but if you strip away the signals that tell the body it is safe and cared for, the body may still resist." Orion frowned slightly. "Are you saying their refusal to eat was not about the food itself, but about trust?" "In part," Maris replied. "They were born in space, surrounded by machines. Every sound, every smell, every taste they experienced was manufactured, perfect in balance, but empty in meaning. The cake was not perfect by a machine's standard, but it was real. They could sense that difference. It connected to something. Inside them, they did not even know they had." The AI's voice entered the conversation from the wall speaker. "Analysis supports this theory. Data from medical archives indicates that human newborns respond positively to sensory input associated with ancestral environments. However, such practices have been largely abandoned in space-borne habitats." Maris looked toward the nearest sensor. "Then perhaps it is time to bring some of it back." Orion studied her for a long moment. "You are telling me that the smallest, simplest parts of being human, smell, touch, sound, can have as much importance as technology?" "They always have," she said softly. "We just forgot when we learned how to build things that could replace them." The twins made small, happy sounds, reaching toward her. Maris leaned forward and let them touch her hands. She smiled at them, and they responded with quiet joy. Orion felt an unexpected heaviness in his chest, not sadness, but the weight of understanding. He had built his life around efficiency, solving problems with speed and precision. Yet here was a problem that could only be solved slowly, with patience and care. When the feeding time came, Maris did not bring the cake again. Instead, she prepared a small bowl of soft fruit cut into tiny pieces. She let the twins smell it first, then taste it. They accepted it easily, their small hands reaching for more. After the feeding, Orion walked with Maris back to the galley. "You said this was not only about my children," he began. "What did you mean?" She placed the empty bowl in the wash unit before answering. "There are thousands of children born in space every year. Many of them never set foot on a planet. They grow up in perfect environments, perfect air, perfect food, perfect light. But they are missing the small imperfections that make the world feel alive. If they never know these things, they may not even realize what they have lost." Orion thought about this as they stood in the quiet galley. "If you are right, then your methods could help every colony, every ship." "They could," Maris agreed, "but only if people understand why it matters. This is not just about feeding the body. It is about feeding the part of us that remembers where we came from." The AI spoke again. "Recommendation: consider initiating a research program aboard the Celestial Crown to test long-term effects of natural sensory feeding methods in space-born children. Probability of success is high." Orion gave a short laugh. "You are suggesting I turn my flagship into a kitchen and laboratory." "I am suggesting you turn it into a place where human heritage is preserved," the AI replied. Maris's eyes met Orion's. I would not call it a laboratory. I would call it a home. Her words stayed with him for the rest of the day. Later, when he walked the corridors of the ship, he noticed the lingering scents from her cooking. Crew members passed, each other with more smiles than usual. There was a sense of warmth that had not been there before. That evening, Orion returned to the nursery. The twins were asleep, their small breaths steady. He stood for a long time at the window, looking out at the distant stars. Somewhere out, there were worlds filled with the scents, sounds, and textures that had shaped humanity. And here, inside a ship of metal and light, one woman had reminded him of their value. When Maris came in quietly to check on the children, Orion spoke without turning from the window. "You have changed more than just their eating habits. You have changed the way I see this ship, and perhaps the way I see the future." Maris smiled gently. "Then they have done their work well." The days that followed the cake event were unlike anything the Celestial Crown had experienced before. The great vessel had always been a symbol of wealth and engineering mastery, a place where every surface shone and every function ran with perfect precision. Yet now, there was something new moving through its corridors, an energy that could not be measured by any device. The twins were at the center of it. They woke each morning with bright eyes and curious hands, eager to explore. They accepted. New foods each day, all prepared by Maris with care. Orion Vale watched them closely, seeing how each small meal became more than just eating. It was a moment of learning, of bonding, of feeling human in a place that had almost forgotten what that meant. One afternoon, Orion called a meeting in the main lounge. The senior crew gathered, along with Maris and the ship's AI projection. The curved walls showed the star field beyond, the twin suns glowing softly in the distance. Orion stood in the center, his voice steady, but carrying a note of quiet conviction. "I built this ship to be the most advanced civilian vessel in our sector," he began. "But in doing so, I see now that I overlooked something important. In our pursuit of perfect systems, we have lost touch with the imperfect things that make us who we are. My children reminded me of that truth, though they are too young to know it." He gestured toward Maris. "This woman brought something aboard that no technology could replicate. Through a simple act, she gave my children the comfort they had been missing. She reminded us of our heritage. I believe this knowledge must be shared." The AI flickered to life beside him. "Proposal. Initiate Project Hearth. Objective. Research and integrate heritage-based sensory environments for human well-being in long-duration space habitation." Orion nodded. "Yes, but I want more than research. I want change. I want every colony, every ship, every orbital habitat to have a place where people can experience the real sounds, smells, tastes, and textures that shaped humanity on Earth." There was a murmur among the crew. Some looked surprised. Others smiled, as if they had been waiting for someone to say it aloud. Maris stepped forward. "If we do this, it will not just be for children. Adults need it too. People who have lived their entire lives in metal corridors deserve to know what it feels like to walk into a room and smell fresh bread, or to hear the crackle of something cooking, or to touch something that grew under sunlight instead of a lamp." The chief engineer raised a hand. "We can adapt some cargo bays into these heritage spaces. It would mean less room for storage, but the benefit to morale could outweigh the cost." The AI confirmed. "Simulations predict a measurable improvement in crew efficiency, mental health, and overall cohesion if heritage environments are maintained." Orion's voice grew stronger. "Then it is decided. The Celestial Crown will be the first ship to carry a living heritage module. And once it is perfected, I will fund installations on every vessel in my fleet." Maris felt a quiet pride, but also a sense of responsibility. "We will need seeds, soil, and ingredients from Earth. We will need to teach people how to work with them, not just program machines to do it for them." Orion smiled. Then we will teach. We will make sure the knowledge is never lost again. The following weeks became a whirlwind of preparation. One section of the celestial crown was cleared and rebuilt. The cold walls were replaced with panels that mimicked wood grain. Warm light filled the space instead of the sterile glow of overhead strips. A small kitchen was installed, not the automated kind, but one with real tools for human hands. Planters, filled with earth plants, were placed along the walls, their green leaves adding life to the air. When the heritage module was ready, Orion brought the twins inside first. They sat in a corner on a soft blanket while Maris baked fresh bread in the oven. The smell filled the space slowly, wrapping around them like a warm blanket. Crew members stepped inside one by one, drawn by the scent. Some closed their eyes, as if remembering something long forgotten. Others smiled without knowing why. Orion stood in the doorway, watching. He realized that in all his years of traveling the stars, this was the first time his ship had felt like more than just a vessel. It felt like a home. Word spread quickly beyond the celestial crown. When the ship docked at the Eridan orbital station, news crews arrived to see the heritage module for themselves. The story of the Billionaire's twins who could not eat until a cake was baked traveled across the communication networks. People on distant worlds sent messages, sharing their own memories of tastes and smells from Earth. Requests began to arrive, requests for guidance, for seeds, for recipes. Some asked for engineers to help build their own heritage spaces. Others simply wanted to thank Orion and Maris for reminding them of something they had not known they had lost. One evening, Orion found himself in the heritage module after most of the crew had gone to rest. The twins were asleep in a nearby crib. Maris was cleaning the kitchen, humming softly. He walked over and said, "You were right. This is not only about food. It is about giving people a place to remember who they are." She looked up at him with a small smile. "And to pass that memory on to the next generation." The ship's AI spoke from the wall. Data supports long-term cultural preservation as a stabilizing factor in human expansion. Project Hearth is now considered a core mission priority. Orion nodded. Good, because this is only the beginning. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly in every direction, but inside the celestial crown, there was the warmth of bread, baking, the laughter of children, and the quiet knowledge that humanity's oldest comforts had found a place among the stars. And for the first time, Orion Vale felt that his journey was not only about reaching new worlds, it was about bringing a piece of home wherever humanity went.